is declared.
And we finally discover the result of this historic referendum.
EU Referendum, the result. Thursday night from 9:55 on BBC One, helping you make sense of the EU referendum.
This is BBC Two. Now Newsnight with Kirsty Walk in the studio, Emily Maitlis in Wembley.
Well, the great debate is finished and we've had it all. Blue on blue, red on red, mayor on mayor. We're in the Wembley spin room with each side declaring victory, trying to work out who's won advantage in the referendum endgame.
It hasn't taken them long.
How many jobs for us?
They began by telling us that they were going to have a positive and patriotic case, and they're back to Project Fear within moments of this debate beginning.
You might start off with Parachu saying how wonderful immigration is, but your campaign hasn't been Project Fear. It's been Project Hate as far as immigration is concerned.
Also tonight,
someone in.
from big stadium events to the most intimate.
Hello, hi, I'm Richard. I'm from Vote Leave.
I think I'm going to vote for Leave.
Leave, yay. Great.
The reason because a lot of people coming from the Europe, and they're taking our jobs.
Excuse me?
Campaigners get up close and in your face as every single vote is chased down in the last hours of this tightest of tight campaigns. With just a day to go, we've banished the politicians. Instead, Howard Jacobson and Jack Monroe, Dreda Say Mitchell and the historian Robert Toombs. They'll be discussing what this referendum and the conduct of it tells us about ourselves. And we hear from Turkey, whose ambitions to join the EU have been used as a stick to hit the Remainers with. President Erdogan's chief advisor is here to hit back.
Hello, good evening from the spin room at Wembley Arena. A noisy affair now, as you can hear. But the last big debate of this fraught referendum campaign has finished. Certainly it was stadium size. But can you say that anyone won? And do these kind of debates really influence people quite so close to polling day? Whatever the case, in such a tight campaign on such a momentous issue, every vote really does matter. And joining me in a moment, we'll explore those arguments made tonight with representatives from both sides. But first, here's David Grossman with the key moments from what you heard.
Wembley Arena is where you can often see veteran bands who are, shall we say, not in their first bloom of youthful creativity. The audiences come to hear their greatest hits, not new material. And that too is the job of tonight's politicians, veterans of this long, long campaign. It is quite simply too close to polling day for them to change their tune. Instead, we've heard some very familiar numbers indeed.
Take back control and vote Leave.
We are stronger, safer and better off in Europe.
After the opening statements, there were questions from the 6,000-strong audience, picked to be half Remain and half Leave supporters.
If we leave the EU, will this be the beginning of a slippery slope towards weaker employment and social rights in the UK?
Andrea Letton.
Well, thank you very much for your question. And the truth is that UK governments have led the way in providing good rights for workers. Even before the European Union came into existence, we had equal pay legislation. It's been governments of all parties that have created minimum wage legislation, now a national living wage, shared parental leave, child-free tax-free childcare, and it's this country that is protecting workers' rights. And we do not need unelected, bureaucratic European leaders who none of us can even name, let alone who any of us voted for, to tell us what our workers' rights can be.
We hear a lot about holidays. Well, when the Working Time Directive came in, 2 million people in Britain got paid holidays for the first time. Mainly women, mainly young people. Do you trust them? Can they promise us today, because I've heard a lot from some of these leading lights in the Leave campaign and what they plan to do on employment rights, can you promise us today that you will protect each and every single right that we want?
All right.
We already have done, replied Boris Johnson. From the economy, the question moved on to immigration.
My family and I have had first-hand experience recently with the NHS. How would it manage if we left the EU, given the UK's inability to train and retain sufficient doctors and nurses?
Boris Johnson.
Thank you very much. Well, I think the first thing we should do tonight in a discussion about immigration is celebrate immigrants and immigration, everything they do for our country. Because I speak entirely personally, they are my family has benefited massively from immigration, and so I know millions of people watching us tonight. The crucial thing, though, is to look in an informed way at what is going on, look at the numbers, look at the pressure that is large-scale, uncontrolled immigration is causing for public services such as the NHS.
You don't fund schools and hospitals, and you don't control immigration by crashing the economy, and that's what leaving the EU would do.
The final part of the debate was on sovereignty, Britain's relationship with the European Union.
If we vote to remain on Thursday, how can we be sure that in another 40 years we won't find ourselves in the United States of Europe?
Sadiq Khan, you start off on this one.
You know, Britain is a sovereign, independent country, just like Germany, just like France. We retain control over our defence, over the pound, over interest rates, over what we do in our schools, our hospitals, our public transport.
I just don't accept that there is a trade-off between trade and democracy. I think democracy is enormously important.
And finally, by way of a sort of encore, the closing statements.
Now, I know that the EU isn't perfect, but the benefits far outweigh any costs. And the Britain that I know, the Britain that I love, works with its friends and neighbours. It doesn't walk away from them.
They say we can't do it. We say we can. They say we have no choice but to bow down to Brussels. We say they are woefully underestimating this country and what it can do.
With perhaps the strangest one-night-only gig in Wembley Arena's long history over, we are now just hours away from polling day, and we'll find out which of these tunes the public is buying.
David Grossman on the Wembley gig. Well, joining us now, our political editor, Nick Watt. And Nick, is it possible to say at this point if there were winners and losers tonight? Certainly this room seems to be buzzing with the talk of Ruth Davidson, who emerged as something as an unknown star to many here.
Yes, I think it's pretty fair to say that in personal terms that was a pretty standout performance from Ruth Davidson, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives. I was talking to a friend of hers this afternoon, and this friend was saying she couldn't wait to get stuck into Boris Johnson, and boy did she get stuck into Boris Johnson. It is important to say that she does have a bit of a head start. She did live through the Scottish referendum and was on the winning side, so has lots of practice in these sorts of debates. But there you saw somebody who doesn't really sound like a Conservative, and the Remain side believes that she connects. But you have to ask, why did they want somebody who doesn't sound like a Conservative, the London Mayor of London and the head of the TUC on that panel? The Remain camp did that because they believe that this referendum is going to be won or lost in the Labour heartlands, and that was the message that they needed to get out tonight. But it is important to say, I think this debate basically told us where this referendum is. It was symbolic of that. It's pretty evenly matched. And whilst everyone's very excited about Ruth Davidson, the Vote Leave camp believe that they did very, very well in getting their fundamental message back: take back control. Now, journalists may sneer every sentence ended with take back control, but what Vote Leave say is on these three core messages tonight: immigration, the economy and Britain's relationship with the EU. People will hear from the Vote Leave tonight: vote for us and you take back control. So on that front, they're quite pleased.
And you've got a sense now of the choreography of what might happen after the polls close, and after we hear on Friday, Nick?
Well, there's obviously great excitement amongst the Vote Leave camp tonight. They're spinning like mad in that room behind us. But what I understand is that the moment that polls close, 1 minute past 10 on Thursday night, the tone amongst Vote Leave Tories will completely change. A letter will be published, signed by most of those Tory Brexit supporters, saying that the Prime Minister should stay on regardless of the result. And if all the Tory Vote Leave supporters who've signed that do not sign a letter calling for him to go, then he will not go. What will then be interesting is that Boris Johnson and Michael Gove will have a sort of a low-key response in the initial hours, but when the result is declared in Manchester, the first voice you will hear from Vote Leave will be Gisela Stewart, the Labour chair of that campaign. She will make either a victory or a concession speech, and then you will not hear from Boris Johnson and Michael Gove until the Prime Minister has responded. And if the Prime Minister has lost this referendum, they will wait to hear what he says, but there is a clear message coming out. The Prime Minister would have to accept the Vote Leave demand that the Prime Minister delays triggering Article 50. That is the mechanism to take the UK out of the EU. One person said to me, if the Prime Minister carries on with his plan to trigger that straight away, he would be thrown into the river, and you may well see some of these people leaving the cabinet. But bit of a debate in Vote Leave. Some Vote Leave people are saying we've got to have our sort of mandate introduced, which is out of the EU, out of the single market. Other people are saying maybe you could negotiate an easier association status.
Those mechanics are fascinating. Nick, thanks very much. Well, arguably, of course, what happens right here, right now in the spin room is just as important as what happened earlier in the arena on that main stage across the road. It is here where the spin doctors and the politicians try to bend the ears or just get their narrative, their understanding of the story right to the journalists in the room to convince them that their side won the day. Joining me now is the Energy Secretary and Remain campaigner, Amber Rudd. Very nice of you to come in, Amber. Did you miss the Prime Minister today? There was some thought a big gaping hole where he should have been.
I didn't quite understand that comment. No, I was here at the debate this evening, and what I heard was sort of emptiness from the Vote Leave campaign. I heard no plan. We're 2 days before this momentous decision, and they were pressed relentlessly on what their plan was, and we heard absolutely nothing, which I think is just irresponsible.
Those that you did have the Remain side, Sadiq Khan, Ruth Davidson, were very positive in their selling of the immigration message and very passionate about it. It was something we hadn't heard. We'd heard a slightly apologetic line on immigration and targets missed, certainly from the Conservatives in the race so far.
I think that they were much franker about immigration than the Leave campaign were. I mean, they did say, we know it's a complicated business, immigration, but they rightly talked about the huge benefits we get from immigration as well. But what I thought was a really revealing moment.
Really revealing moment. Earlier, I wonder. I mean, to be able to stand there and say, don't knock immigration, it's doing great things, might have been a line that...
No, but that has been part of what we've been saying all along. The fact is, when the Vote Leave campaign were challenged on immigration, there was a slight pause and shock, because they have been saying, their campaign, one thing to one group and another thing to another group. Some immigrants think their communities are going to grow, some think they're going to get lesser. And I think that was revealed tonight when they couldn't give a number and they couldn't even say whether it was going to go up or down. This whole emphasis they've put on immigration is like the rest of their plan. There is no thought about how to deliver it.
Some would say you've had the same problem when it comes to Turkey, sending out two messages that we've heard everyone, the Chancellor, we've heard David Cameron say it's not going to happen, it's simply not on the cards, not in my lifetime. And we heard the chief advisor to the Turkish president tell Newsnight he was flabbergasted that Turkey won't be joining the EU. He said, we thought Cameron was our chief supporter of membership.
I think we all know that this is a red herring, something that's been ruthlessly used by the Leave campaign.
Wait a second, are Turkey wrong? Because it's on the website, isn't it? The Ankara embassy website says that Turkey is in plans to join the EU.
We have always said that it's going to be 34 different chapters, and on the current rate, it could be by the end of the next century.
But you haven't managed to shut this down.
No, but I think we have to look at it, and I think we have to be very clear what the Leave campaign are doing here. As Sadiq Khan showed, they've been sending out misleading leaflets talking about Turkey and mentioning only a number of countries, Turkey, Iraq, Iran. I'm afraid Sadiq was right when he said that they have elements in their campaign which is Project Hate, and they need to be much more careful about that.
But you have been accused of Project Fear. I wonder whether you go back over the falling house prices, the tax rises, the emergency austerity budget. these prophecies of doom, you could have chosen a way which was, you know, the sunlit uplands. You know, you could have had making the campaign a nicer place. Does that feel like something missed?
I think it's absolutely right to talk about the benefits we have in the European Union, which we have been doing, and I was very pleased to hear Sadiq Khan mention climate change for the first time. But the fact is, on Thursday, this decision is huge, and the impact on the economy and to people's everyday lives, to their families, to the jobs. Francis O'Grady made that point very clearly. The Leave campaign are reckless with people's jobs. It is irresponsible, and it's a leap into the dark.
Amber Rudd, thank you very much indeed. Well, on Newsnight, we usually like to have people from both sides debating each other, but due to what you might understand is a pretty strict edict these days from Number 10, barring what they call blue-on-blue discussions, that's held to the very end of this campaign. So Amber Rudd has left us now, but in exchange, her fellow Conservative Minister and Leave campaigner Dominic Raab, thanks very much. What about this Project Hate? Project Fear becoming Project Hate?
I think they've doubled down on the scaremongering and the negativity. The standout thing tonight for me was Sadiq Khan, newly elected Mayor of London, telling us all how scared he is. And on the contrasting side, Boris Johnson saying Thursday's Independence Day, the optimistic, ambitious message, the confidence in the very people we want to turn out and vote. And that's the contrast between the two campaigns. Was at the start, will be at the end.
What happened to that 350 million figure? I didn't hear that at all tonight, did you?
I think it slipped in different
I don't think
areas,
it slipped in at all tonight.
I've used it consistently. I'm very comfortable. I think people understand why 350 million is a gross figure, and when you get paid your salary by the BBC, I shudder to think how high it is.
The full 350 million. On that podium up there, there was no mention
and then you've got your
of 350. And I'm wondering whether there was a quiet acknowledgement that you overplayed your hand on that number and it's been ditched.
I think there was a lot of talk about taking back control. I think they talked about the annual figure. You heard Angela Leadsom talking about the annual
Taking back
dividend.
control is not the same as using a figure that has been called out as a lie many times.
But it's not a lie,
and then
is
dropping
it?
it.
Oh, hold on. You're a reporter. You've got a responsibility. 350 million is our gross weekly contribution for EU. There is no doubt about that. No doubt about that. I'll talk about that all night long.
If they're so confident about it, then why have we started getting different figures in the last week? Why has Boris Johnson talked about the Leave and the net? Why did we not hear it at all tonight if you're so confident?
We've always talked about the gross and the net. And what Angela Leadsom pointed out is on Independence Day on Thursday, once we leave the EU, we get annually £10 billion a year. Now, obviously, that's an annual figure, but that's the net figure. But we've talked about both of the figures. The reason why they're both important is one is the amount we send to Brussels and we don't see back. The other is the amount we send to Brussels and they spend on our behalf. We want it all back and we want control over the lot.
You really need people to explain exactly the difference there, don't you, between the net and the gain and what those amounts make up.
I think they've got it by now.
Right. They need an expert voice.
No, I don't. Look, when you get your paycheck every month, you've got your salary and then you've got your take home.
I'm asking you a different thing, which is that your campaign has, in the words of Michael Gove, ditched the words of experts. You don't.
No, we've had quite a few experts. We've had economists from Andrew Lidico to Roger Bootle. Michael Burridge has done really important work about why freed up from the EU is...
So you're still a fan of the expert, right? Because a lot on your side are saying, well, hang on, we've done with experts, we don't believe them, we don't like them.
No, I don't think lining up the establishment and saying that because we've got a roll call of elite figures on your side...
What, like MI5 or MI6 or NATO?
We'll take MI6, so we can point to Sir Richard Dearlove. We can point to former heads of the counter-terrorism branch at the Met Police, Richard Walton, who are on our side. We can talk about Sir Michael Rose, former head of the SAS. But actually, that's not what people care about, a roll call of names. It's about the evidence, and also not just the rational side, but the passion and the optimism. And what came out of this debate tonight was that's clearly on the side of Leave.
Dominic, thanks very much indeed. Dominic Raab there. Well, as you can see, there is still a few little huddles going on behind me. Perhaps you can't, but you can hear them, noises off. This is when some of the politicians who weren't in the debate come and they talk us through what they think happened tonight. There are column inches being done. There is the pitter-patter of tiny deadlines being written. Who knows whether at this stage there are that many undecided minds left in the country? If there are, there's all to play for. We have 2 days. Back to you, Kirsty.
Thanks, Emily. Well, one of the biggest issues of the referendum campaign has been the status of Turkey. And as Emily said, it was raised as an issue in the BBC debate tonight. Those who want to Brexit have brandished possible Turkish membership of the EU as a reason to leave, with claims that millions of Turks could migrate to the UK, putting strains on communities and public services. Those who want to remain have been at pains to stress there is no chance of Turkey joining the EU in the near future. David Cameron himself has said they won't join until the year 3000. Well, earlier I spoke to Ilnur Çevik, the chief advisor to President Erdogan, and I began by asking him what he made of that claim by the Prime Minister.
Well, we are really flabbergasted, let's put it that way. We thought that Mr. Cameron was our chief supporter for our quest in European Union membership. Turks felt that the British were the driving force behind our EU membership and that they were supporting us right to the hilt. But the way Mr. Cameron put it, he didn't believe anything, apparently, in our full membership, that he was only deceiving us and that he was just buying time. While the others, at least, were very frank. They said, we don't want you in the European Union. The Germans said, we will offer you another kind of partnership. The French said, we don't want you. Many countries said this. But the way Mr. Cameron put it, we feel really taken in. Because the way he's putting it, he says, you know, they were never going to go in anyway. And we just said, we'll go along with them. That kind of attitude really is deeply hurting the Turks.
What do you think of David Cameron's position now, having said that he wanted you in and then having said now that he sees little prospect of it?
Well, as I said, we still feel that he was taking us for a ride. This kind of attitude is very insincere. We felt that when we needed him, he was going to be there. But now we feel that he was just saying, let me toy around with them. They're not going to get in anyway. But let us not be the bad guys to tell them that they won't get in.
Do you believe in the David Cameron that wants you to join, or do you believe in the David Cameron that doesn't want you to join? Which is it?
Well, to be frank, the way he's putting it, we don't think that he really wants us to join it.
Now, let's turn now to the Leave campaign. The Leave campaign says that countries should be able to control their borders because mass migration puts a huge strain on social services, health services, education services. Do you agree with that?
Well, Britain is already controlling its borders. Britain's borders are not uncontrollable. Who's coming into Britain? There is a visa restriction for Turks in Britain. Even if the European Union lifted Turkey's visa restrictions through the Schengen Agreement, still there's the British visa. So how can Turks enter Britain while the current visa restrictions are in force?
Now, the Leave campaign says one of their arguments against Turkey joining is because your crime rate's very high, your level of gun ownership is very high, and they say, why should we give Turkey access to Britain in those circumstances?
Well, firstly, the crime rate is not high. Secondly, there's no extraordinary situation in this country that we would export anything to Britain. But besides that, who's going to come to Britain? Why should we be flooding Britain? There's no reason. Whatever exists in Britain also exists in Turkey.
Except that
we're not going to go there just because you produce Cadbury chocolates and Maltesers, for God's sake.
Do you think Britain should leave the EU?
That's nothing to do with us. That's a choice for the British people. If they want to leave the European Union, they should. But they should not use us as an alibi. They should not use us as a pretext. We should be out of that equation. They should really deal on the nitty-gritty of why they should be leaving. And they should not use us as an alibi.
Mr. Çevik, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now we bring you the antidote to tonight's stadium debate. The decisions made quietly by people talking amongst themselves in their own homes, discussing the issues in the pub, or on the doorstep. Katie Razzle has been listening and watching as campaigners doggedly follow after every vote in a referendum which looks like it's going to be a close-run thing.
With 2 days to go, Newsnight set up stall in one of Greater London's royal boroughs to try to ascertain what's driving decision-making in the EU vote. It turns out you can make a lot of new friends with some garden furniture, a nice bit of linen, some posters and a selfie stick.
So you're going to take this? Oh, you don't want to. You don't like David Cameron? No. Which one would you prefer? So you're going to take this one. That one. Oh, you don't want to selfie with any of them? No. Which one do you want to pick? Okay. Will you hold that?
The question is straightforward. Should we be in or out of the EU? But that question has apparently split Britain down the middle. Which side do you trust? That's what we asked the good burghers of Kingston upon Thames, the likes of Boris Johnson, Gisela Stewart and Nigel Farage for Leave, or David Cameron and Nicola Sturgeon for Remain. And how are you making the decision?
Who do you trust?
I'm an arrogant old geezer. I don't take anyone's word. I do what I want. It's not democracy. My dad didn't fight in the war for this.
How do you decide what's a fact and what's not?
Well, you listen carefully to what people are saying and you dismiss most of it.
Even people like the Governor of the Bank of England?
Well, he's Canadian, isn't he?
He is.
And Obama came and expressed an opinion. What do they know? They know nothing.
So you have been trusting experts on the Remain side?
Yes.
If you've got a situation where 90% plus are telling you that the economics make sense, then yes, the experts do know what they're talking about from that point of view.
With the polls so close, every moment counts. Newsnight asked campaigners on both sides to wear a camera today and record reaction. On the streets of central London, Leave campaigner Richard Hendren got a more mixed reaction than he was expecting.
Hi, so are you going to vote to leave?
No.
Have you voted yet?
No.
Are you going to vote?
No.
Vote in.
About the why?
Because you're going to miss out on so much.
What are you going to miss out of?
Peace.
Peace.
For one.
Oh. Out. Yes. Great. Have you decided how you're going to vote yet?
Not yet, because it's not easy. I didn't decide yet, but I prefer remaining.
But there are still those whose minds he won't change.
Hello. Hi, so I couldn't find the doorbell.
Yeah.
I'm from Vote Leave.
Already, I did my vote by post already.
Can I ask who did you vote for?
The opposite. In this day and age, to go in alone, a little country going it slow, I don't think it's feasible, really, quite frankly. And I think it's better for younger people too. For me, it really doesn't matter.
What about the tampon tax?
I don't know about the tampons.
Excuse me. Do you know which way you're voting in the referendum?
Meanwhile, in North London, an area which should sit firmly in the Remain camp, Sam Povey is still finding some firm Brexiteers. It really does look as if this is going to the wire.
Hi there.
Hello,
Do you know
sir.
which way you're voting in the referendum?
I can tell you explicitly.
Yeah?
Out, 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 and stay out, and wish we'd never come in.
Hi guys, have you decided which way you're voting in the EU referendum?
Yes.
Yes? Which way?
Excellent.
Are you guys eligible to vote?
I'm still 15.
Okay, so are you eligible to vote?
Yeah, I'm 18. I've decided.
Yeah? So what was it that swayed you in favour of staying in then?
It's the power.
Yeah?
And the money.
Do you guys have a moment to chat about the referendum?
Yeah, I'm voting out.
You guys decided which way you're voting?
I would say I'm in.
You're in?
Yeah.
Why is that?
There's loads of things. I mean, like the visa, for example, having to go abroad, the issue of getting new visas, the uncertainty of people's being taxed more.
Yeah. Excuse me, do you know which way you're voting in the referendum?
Yeah.
Which way?
Out.
So why are you voting out then?
A couple of reasons really. Hopefully there'll be more jobs for British people, and also look at around you. Look at it. Where we're standing now, you point to me 10 British people.
Okay.
For weeks and months, the arguments have raged. At Kingston College, how are these staff and students making up their minds?
Have these people down here influenced how you're going to vote?
I think these people are just like a rough guide to people making their decision. You take it a little bit from everyone.
It's become a popularity contest, and
you know, if we vote out, there's going to be billions of immigrants every week falling over our borders. If we leave, we're going to be in a massive recession. It's scaremongering on both sides, but that is what modern day politics is.
I think it should be a personal decision. I think even though you should pay attention to some stats.
Have you trusted anyone in this?
Not really, no.
Yeah, I don't really trust.
Who is it you don't trust?
The politicians.
And the experts, or just the politicians?
Well, they're all much of a muchness, aren't they? They're all sort of in each other's pockets.
So, if that's the case, then how are you going to decide?
Speak to my dad.
In the end, it's going to be your dad.
Yeah.
You trust him?
I trust him.
Back on the street, one outer had really gone to town.
Anti-EU flag, that is.
Is it? Did you make it up? Or is it actually official?
Tried getting one, made it myself. And I honestly don't know anyone that's not voting out.
Really? Yeah. I'll take Nigel back from you if you don't mind. Someone else might want him.
Can I keep it?
No.
No. That's fair enough.
And with that, he was off. Neither he nor we have got too long to wait now for the outcome of this referendum.
Katie Razzle on the street. So how has the referendum campaign been for you? Have you been dismayed by the nature of the argument, or have you relished the hand-to-hand combat? Project fear on each side, claim and counterclaim, blunt warnings and intemperate language, accusations of lies and misinformation. What has the prosecution of the campaign told us about the public discourse in Britain? And has it unearthed deep-seated divisions and fault lines in our culture? Here with me, the writers Howard Jacobson, Jack Monroe and Dreda C. Mitchell, and the historian Robert Toombs. Good evening to all of you. First of all, let's talk about the conduct of the campaign. Howard Jacobson, you heard there about scaremongering, what that woman was saying there about scaremongering on both sides. What do you think about the conduct and the language?
I'm exhilarated by the campaign and depressed by it, all at the same time. You can feel both. I very much, as a Remainer, and I never began as a Remainer. I've been a person who wanted to leave the Europe forever. I left every morning. I left Europe until I realised there was going to be a referendum, and then people were doing this seriously. It's one thing to play at leaving, but people were seriously leaving. So I became a Remainer there and then. And since then, I've grown very depressed by, more than anything else, the charge from people who want to leave that the Remainers are scaremongering. I've not heard any scaremongering, actually, from the Remain thing. They're saying you're about to take a leap in the dark. That's frightening. Be frightened of the unknown. Just let me finish this. There's a difference between saying being frightened of the unknown and what the Brexiteers are doing, which is saying be frightened of other people.
From your point of view, Robert, though, as a historian, is there something particularly about the whole binary nature of a referendum that brings out that kind of the visceral hand-to-hand combat, you know, and also the idea that it's going to be a simple majority? It could just be 140 people, 141 people.
Let's hope not. Yes, of course. I mean, what strikes me about the campaign has been how little the establishment has been listened to by a very large proportion of the electorate. You know, these masses of people, the people who are supposed to be our leaders, who've been telling us over and over again that this is the way we must vote. I mean, it reminds me of sort of Victorian squires saying to their tenants, you have to vote for me or you'll be evicted. And I think there has been scaremongering, a lot of scaremongering.
What about the kind of language, Dreda?
I mean, for me, it has been a lot of scaremongering on both sides. I think with the Remain, it's been much more about economics. I remember, you know, George Osborne, talk about an own goal, saying, oh, house prices will drop. Well, most of the young people I know were jumping in the air. Yes, I can finally manage to actually get something. I was someone, when I actually watched what was going on in the telly, my perception was, because I didn't see much of Labour being involved, which I, as a left-wing Labour supporter, was very disappointed about, I just saw infighting among one particular party. And actually, to tell you the truth, and I've said this publicly, I turned my television off and I actually went and tried to educate myself via reading, talking to other people, and that's how I came to a decision to actually leave. I was very disturbed by the type of public campaign I saw on both sides.
Jack, how has the campaign been for you? How it's been prosecuted? What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, it's been insidious. It's been xenophobic. It's been terrifying. It's been a lot of very noisy rhetoric from the same faces, from the same establishment figures. And I would challenge your claim that the electorate aren't listening to the establishment. I would say actually the establishment aren't listening to the electorate. I don't see my views represented anywhere in the EU debate. I don't see the views of my father, of many of my friends. I feel we've got the same sort of bevy of people telling us what's best for us, and nobody's really asking us what's best for us. And it is a very binary debate, and it does get very heated, but it's the lies, damn lies and statistics that have really got me in this. Is how are people really supposed to know how to vote when so many people are distorting so many facts?
But I think what has happened is, if you go outside of London, it's a very different picture.
I live outside of London.
Yeah,
I live in Essex.
so it's a very different picture. But I think what's really come to the surface for me is the divisions among class. When you talk to a lot of working class people, they are saying that they will vote for leave. And what was interesting with the referendum debate tonight at Wembley was Frances O'Grady was saying, I'm standing for workers, and she's on the Remain side. But a lot of the workers were saying, no, you're not actually standing for us. And I think the problem has been, as a Labour voter, that the Labour Party has been a bit too much in the shadows. And I think one of the issues for the future is, where are working class people going to vote?
But when you've got the project fear followed by what Sadiq Khan said tonight in the debate was project hate, you've got the kind of language of the is it the language of the social media age?
In this country, we have a proud tradition of vehement debate. We are sarcastic, we love argument, we love being rude to one another. In the 19th century, writers used to come to watch pantomime in England because they loved the violence of it. We've got great cartoonists. So all this is within our tradition. What's different, I think, and this I would not put down to our national character, and I would put it down to the effect of social media, is this assumption that everybody who doesn't think that what you think is a moron. And not only is he a moron, he's a liar. And this idea that there's... The trouble with a binary debate is it's exactly in the spirit of the social media, in or out, whereas we all know that all the interesting things are between those two thumbs. But we've got no opportunity here to do anything but say in and out. And encouraged by the social media, we now suppose that everybody who doesn't think what we think deserves to die, really.
So is this actually a reflection of a solid democracy?
Well, I think it's going to leave rather a political hangover. I mean, it's shown that there are divisions that we always knew were there, social divisions, generational divisions, regional divisions, but they've proved to be rather more emotional and rather deeper than I think we thought. And I think it's shown a huge amount of distrust. And what worries me really is that whatever the result, people are going to be looking for things to go wrong afterwards.
And also, by the very nature of how the result is counted, we're going to know geographically, demographically, how this is panning out and where the divisions actually lie, Rada.
And I think that's an important thing to know, because I think for too long, when we talk about politics, it very much has been centred on London and the South. And Westminster, and I think it was even interesting with Newsnight's kind of, analysis of the debate just now. We were talking very much to politicians, and I thought to myself, why has there been no kind of discussion? Couldn't they have had a satellite in another part of the country talking to people outside of London?
I suppose that we've been doing that for Newsnight all last week. We had a referendum truck around the country.
But I think for that particular debate, because it's such a key debate, it would have been an interesting perspective to have, and I think it's a good example of what we're not actually doing sometimes.
Are you concerned, Jack, that some of the divisions that this has exposed will remain? They will not be papered over on Friday?
Absolutely, and I think it will highlight what different people's concerns are in a way that we probably don't have that information at the moment, because our politics is seems so focused in the wrong groups, in the wrong places. There are large swathes of people who feel not represented, not listened to, and that's how we have Farage, it's how we have Trump over in the States, it's how we have these blustering, obsessively nasty politicians getting their armies of people to listen to them, because they're people who feel like they're not being represented. We've got a working class revolution going on, but they all seem to be going in a rather dangerous direction. And
I agree with that. But I think in a way the EU provides an extra layer of a problem, because all over the Western world, in the democratic world, people are feeling unrepresented by their politicians. But then you have in the EU another layer which separates people from politicians, and where decisions are being made quite outside the accountability and indeed the knowledge of the voters. And I think that's a big problem for European democracy.
How do you feel about the House of Lords, then, if we're talking about unelected representatives?
Well, that's yet another layer of question. But before we finish this, Howard, how do you make your peace with your friends who perhaps take a different view from you?
My friends don't take a different view from me. they're very quickly persuaded of the rightness of my point of view. And I don't have any friends who say, I want my country back. I have a great deal of sympathy for people who live in areas where they sometimes don't hear their own language spoken and so on. I don't think we should talk about racists the way we sometimes do. But nonetheless, to hear people speaking, as we are hearing them speaking quite frequently now, I want my country back, that's terrifying. It wasn't that long ago where we saw what people saying, I want my country back, led to. This country has not been taken over. We are not occupied. We have a distinct, vibrant culture. We are ourselves. We have got nothing to fear about being taken over. It's a wicked language, that. And it's terrifying language.
But if you are on the side of leave and you end up being, as it were, lumped in with people who say, I want to take my country back...
They want their democracy back. That's what people are saying.
But how does that sit with you? You want your country back. Do you believe that?
Well, what I believe is that democracy in Europe is under a lot of pressure. And I think that the EU, which is what we're supposed to be talking about, is making that worse. It's aggravating that situation. OK, it hasn't really reached us yet, and you could say this is not really our problem. You know, we're not in the euro, we're not in the Schengen zone. But if you look all around Europe, there's a rise of populist parties of right and left. And I think Europe is really heading for some sort of political crisis.
Dreda, you're in a position now where you have some bedfellows that you wouldn't normally want to have as bedfellows. How comfortable do you feel about that?
To me, it's never ever been, the issue around EU has never been one that's about a left and right debate. It goes right across the parties. And I think I'm actually in the tradition of the Labour Party from the 1970s and the 1980s with the big slogan, get Britain out. That's where I think I'm sitting. And it's not a debate about personalities, it's about the issues.
Well, thank you all very much indeed. Vote well, but just vote once. That's all we have time for. Evan's back tomorrow for the last day of the you-know-what. Good night.
Good evening. Most of us going tonight to dry, but